So this is a podcast called Life with No Filter. And on the podcast today with me, I'm Rod Maxwell, are three friends of mine who 4 years ago I'd never met, because 4 years ago I didn't have a brain injury. And we all met as a result of getting to know each other. And we've all had one thing in common. We've all had operations to our brain. We've all been through the experience of that. So on this podcast, which is called Life with No Filter, and that will become explained why it is that called that. I have got Kavita, Brooke, and Vanessa. So I think we're all going to introduce ourselves. Why don't you start, Kavita?
Hi, so I'm Kavita Basi, and in 2015, I had a brain hemorrhage, which was a massive shock to the system. Before that, I was working as a vice president in a global fashion company. And so I had the hemorrhage, and it led me to be in hospital for 8 weeks, had 4 brain operations, and came out of it having to relearn a lot of the basic things that you take for granted in life. So I'm here today, and I'm trying to do my best in giving a positive outlook on what you can do after having a brain injury.
All right, Brooke.
Hello, my name's Brooke. I was a student in 2007. I'd been for a night out and was walking home to catch the bus in Manchester, and I was hit by a car that was travelling at 50 miles an hour. He saw me, skidded, braked. I was running over the road. I'd made the pavement at the other side. He skidded onto the pavement, hit me, and my head went through the windscreen. I had a severe traumatic brain injury. I was in a coma for 16 days, hospital for 6 months. And I'm still recovering 13 years later. I've started public speaking. Well, I've moved to Manchester. I live on my own independently. I have a house here. I've started public speaking, blogging. I've also got a memory problem. And I work part-time for a company called CFG Law, doing blogs on their behalf. There's a things to try and speaking about having a brain injury and bring a bit of normalization to it. Try and make a bit of humor to it as well. So it's it can be a very shocking thing to happen to you. So I just try and be as normal as I can.
Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Robinson, and in 2013 I had a brain hemorrhage caused by a cavernoma in my brain. I had 4 separate operations to finally remove it, and after I was in and out of hospital, but after 5 months I came home. This was 7 years ago, and I'm living with a brain injury. Life's very different from the corporate world that I left, but generally I'm just very grateful and happy to be alive and living my full life.
And I'm Rod Maxwell, and in 30th of September 2016, I was taken to it wasn't Salford Road, it was Wythenshawe, and they did a scan, an MRI scan on me, and they found cavernoma as well, which is it was about the size of a golf ball, and it was a buildup of blood cells that had caused swelling on my brain, and that made sense for all the bad headaches I'd had for the previous probably 9 months, and I thought it was stress of work and pressure, and I avoided it basically. But luckily we have got great hospitals in the area. I was taken to Salford Royal that night, and a few days later I had an operation to remove the golf ball sized tumor. I was there for 2 months, and after coming out is when I realized how much life would change. I've suffered memory issues and that also some depression from the change to my life, because I thought my life was fulfilled and going in a great place. And I've had to relearn about my life. And actually meeting people like these three that are on the podcast today has been a big part of me actually getting my life back on track. So that's us. As our first topic, we said we would talk about when did we know that this was going to have an impact on your life. And the moment you find out that actually you've got something wrong with your brain, which is a bit different to something wrong with your arm, your leg, or even your heart to a degree. When did you know that it was going to have an impact, change the way you lived your life? Kavita, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I was actually really, really, really grateful, like you said, Vanessa, that I was actually here and alive. So I think the highs of it, when you leave hospital, you think, oh my God, I'm here, I'm okay, I will be okay. It only hits reality when you start going back into the routine, maybe, of what you did before. So I think for me, it was when I actually went back to work, and it was 6 months later after I'd come out of hospital, and I went back to work being a vice president again, and in the role that I was. And it just like completely dawned on me that, oh my God, I can't even like do some simple tasks that I could, do probably hundreds of them in one day beforehand. And it was those kind of things that made me sort of realize that I wasn't the same. I think before that, because I was still resting and I was still recovering and people around me were looking after me at home, it was a bit different. But I think going back into that role at work was like the daunting side. It was so scary. I mean, I couldn't even read a spreadsheet properly. And it was, I had a panic attack. That day when I went in.
See, I remember the day they told me that I wouldn't be allowed to drive. I was in hospital and I had to surrender my driving license. I was on the hospital bed, and I sort of thought, this is significant, that I've lost something that I've had since I was 17, and I wasn't going to be allowed to do it again. And that hit me as a first off, and then when I came out of hospital, I felt very fragile because my memory was causing me to forget where I was. So I had to be chaperoned in case I got lost. And when I did eventually get my driver's license back, I used to forget where I parked the car, and I would walk around Tesco and Altrincham trying to find the car, and that gripped me. The fear gripped me. And it wasn't like you, Kavita, it wasn't until I was back in normal life that I feel quite vulnerable and fragile, because I couldn't remember simple things.
I was different to that. I was in no sort of position to drive a car or anything like that. I don't think I realised that for a long while, I'm talking like 5 or 6 years, I told you I had a brain injury, what had happened to me, but I didn't really sort of believe it. It was like, it just, I don't know, it takes me so long to learn things these days. And I just didn't really understand it. Yeah, talking probably like 6 years. I mean, there was no way my mum and dad would have let me, let me drive a car. I mean, I was 24 at the time. I was at university, so I went back to live with my parents, and I was like a kid again, which was really sort of frustrating for me. You were all, you all had, established careers and stuff, and I didn't, and I was still just a big kid, really. So I went back to live with my parents, and then I eventually I tried quite quickly to move back to Manchester. So I came with my mum and dad. I'd been around the world. I'd come back to Scarborough. I'd come back to Scarborough, and then realised that I wanted something more out of my life. So I moved. My sister says, "Why don't you move to Manchester?" So I started university in Manchester, and then that's when it happened to me. And then I moved back in my parents for 6 months, and then that was driving me mad. So my sister says, "Why don't you come and live with me in Manchester again?" So I did that. So I lived with my parents 6 months, my sister 6 months, and then I thought I was fine. I thought I would be able to pick up my life where it was. But so I moved back into a shared house. There weren't students by that point. They'd all started working, but they were still in a shared house. And I think it really hit me then, that how much my mum and my sister, my parents and my sister, give my dad some credit as well, how much my parents and my sister had been doing for me. And I just became obsessed with this one room. Like, I kept the kitchen tidy. And it was a really small kitchen. And that was like my obsession. That's the one thing I found that I could do. And like, my mates would come in, they would come in late, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they would like leave all the takeaways and stuff on the side. And I found myself like, I was like my mum or like your dad, it was just like, and they used to leave all the rubbish on the side, empty chicken wrappers and stuff on the kitchen workbench, and that used to drive me mad. And I went a little bit crazy. As part of my court case that was going on, like an expert witness report came, and he said I had depression. So I moved back to Scarborough, but the only condition was I got my own flat. So that was probably the first time I noticed, when I was living in my friend's house, I couldn't keep up with it, and I just got really depressed and came back. I initially wanted to move back in with my parents, but I wanted to end up compromising and getting my own flat. So that's when I first noticed.
And Vanessa, what about you? What was it that made you realise things were different?
Well, I think as soon as I woke up in hospital, because I couldn't even sit up in bed. I had to be fed. I had to learn how to walk again. So for me, it was being in Salford Royal. And everybody kept telling me how lucky I was to be alive, which I appreciated. But I think that's when I thought, it has been something major. Yes, it's not going to be the same. But then, so when I did come home, I think, hospital is such a different routine to anything normal, that when I did come home, I think I expected to walk back into my existing life, but I couldn't even get in through the front door because there's a step up, and in my physio, I hadn't been taught how to swing my legs to go over a step, if you know what I mean. So yes, and when so I was under the community neuro team, and I remember sort of like crying to them and saying, I've had a shower, I've got out of bed, I've had a shower, I've got dressed, and now I'm so tired I've got to go back to bed. And they were trying to say, well, you've just had brain surgery, what do you expect? And I think I expected, because I'd come home, to step back into that life. But I was first taken into hospital in the February, and my last operation was in the July. And the following July, I had I thought I was having another hemorrhage. So I went back into Salford Royal, and I was only in there for 2 days, and it turned out that I hadn't, but I'd been overdoing it, so I was really tired. And I think that's when I realised that actually I have got to change my life, because I can't go back to how I was before. Initially in hospital, I thought I'd lost everything. And then when I came home, I thought, well, you know, the four walls are still the same. I must be the same person. But it wasn't, you know, for another year that I actually said, I accept this, you know, I am different. I've got to change my life.
So we're going to hopefully cover a range of different topics across this series of podcasts, with the hope that it might help some people who are in our situation, whether it be they're the person going through it, or their families, that helps their families. Because I guess the one thing I've realized is that when you've had such a critical illness, it's not just you, the patient, that suffers. The whole family gets impacted by that, and it changes a lot of things. But I guess go back to you, Kavita. What do you think have been the biggest changes, and they can be positive or negative changes in your life as a result of what's happened?
I think I like to live life to the full as much as I can. I've always been like that, I think, pre-hemorrhage. But what it did bring out for me was that I wanted to embrace whatever I was like at this time. And I think that there has been some negative issues, and I have got some side effects, and I have got some things that I have to deal with. But I think for me, it's more about how do I use those things and how do I adapt my life to try and make sure that I am living the best I can. And it is a bit of a shame, because, you know, when you have a brain injury, you have so many different side effects, like your personality changes, you have the memory loss, you have like all these different things. But I just think for me, it's more about making sure that I am doing the best to whatever I can, and making sure that I keep on doing that. And I take it as a positive, because I don't think pre-hemorrhage I was doing that with my life. I think I was always running a million miles an hour trying to get everything done. And now I actually just sort of live in the moment a little bit more. So I think that's the biggest change for me, is that I'm living in the moment. I'm not thinking about what used to happen, what I've got to do tomorrow. Well, I do sometimes think about that, but it's more about me now. And that has actually made me a bit happier.
I get that. In terms of living in the moment, like people ask me, like, what have I done yesterday? What have I been up to this last week? And what am I doing tomorrow? I don't know, but I'm just like, I'm fine. So I often can't remember what I did yesterday. Can't remember what I did the weekend. Can't remember. I don't know what I'm doing next weekend. Don't know what my plans are, but I'm all right. So I'm just quite cheerful as it is.
So I liken the thing to a bit like an earthquake, and it was the aftershocks that hit me most. And some of those have been positive things in my life, and it's been a bit like sliding doors, just to chuck that in. And that some of the positive things have been that actually I feel like I've had a second chance of life. And therefore, and when I think positively, that's the best way I could think about it, because I definitely went through a depressed phase where I sort of thought my life's been taken away from me. Not my physical life, but the life I had intended to lead was taken away from me, and I had no control. For the first time in my life, I had no control over that. And I was mourning that old life, and I realized I had to. It was a bit like sliding doors. I made a conscious decision to not look backwards at the life I had, but only look forward, because I thought every time I looked in the rearview mirror, trying to build or bring back some part of the life I had, it was just bringing me down, because I knew I couldn't go back to that, and I had to make a physical, almost mental separation, that I was not Rod Maxwell, the consultant, the partner, whoever. I had to make a separation for my own good, that I was going to have to be something else. The scary thing for me was I didn't know what that was going to be. You know, I was coming to 50. I'd always been, I'd always been a certain professional. I was a father, I was a husband, I was a son, if you like, and now a big part of that was gone, and it felt like it was taken from me, which I think is where some of the depression came in, because suddenly I had no control. But then sometimes I think, I've got a second chance. I've got a chance to plan it out and build it in a different way, and that's when I feel lucky. I feel like, the people of Salford have given me a second chance. The NHS has given me a second chance of life, and not to lose a day of it, if you like, But I definitely think that psychological process can be quite scary. I don't know, Vanessa, was that any of that like for you?
Yes, yeah, no, I can understand and appreciate all that. I definitely identify with the loss of independence and the loss of identity. I remember thinking, well, what do people do if they don't work? And it's sort of, going out, I'm saying the early days, but after about a year, and just thinking, what are these people doing that they're not at work? Yes, my children, they both just gone to university, so I'd lost a bit of the empty nest syndrome anyway, but they were then started caring for me, so I was no longer a mother, was no longer, although I was a wife, my husband, he's still the carer of me. So I felt that I'd been stripped of any role, and trying to find your place in
life. I think where I'm different to you lot is you all had established careers. I didn't. I was just like getting my life started. I was just at university, and I didn't really have a life to go back to, because I was just on that verge of starting something. So mine was just a bit weird.
Yeah, because you were already at the beginning of a new chapter, and that chapter should have taken you a certain direction, and you didn't get that chance at all. Well, look, I think we've lost Vanessa. Oh, Vanessa's back. Hello.
Yeah. I don't know. Obviously, didn't like what I was saying. But so one of the things, I discovered a passion for gardening. Now, believe me, I never had that interest before. I never had time. I was a bit like Kavita was saying. If you look at my diaries pre-brain injury, it just makes me gasp at how I managed to fit so much into my life. So although I wanted my garden to look nice, I never ever had time to do that. And I also find that gardening is about hope, because you're investing in the future. But my family and friends have always been very, very important to me, but they become even more important, and I value friendships and relationships probably more than I probably got more time for them now. So I can't remember what the question is. I think I'm a very positive person, because according to medical science, we shouldn't be here, and we are. And I'm walking, I'm talking, maybe I'm not making sense, but it is so much better than it was supposed to be.
And I think the lovely thing about knowing all of us is that we're living the best lives that we can, and in some way, in some ways, I think maybe mine's a bit more fulfilled than it was previously. And I've met a wide range of people who have added to my life. Not saying other people didn't, but I feel more enriched because of the experiences I've had, and meeting people like yourselves. And I feel very lucky that we had the NHS that was there to care for me and look after me at a critical time, as it did all of you guys.
I actually feel like so free. I actually feel that you know, what everyone's saying is that we've just been given like a blank canvas sort of thing, and being able to sort of change the way that we did things before, in a positive way. Of course, there's still so many things that sort of hold us back, compared to like the normal average person. But I just actually feel so free. I actually feel really, really free. And yeah, completely agree with, like, it's being lucky that that we've got this chance to be.
I don't do anything that I should now. So I always had a thing of, you know, I should do the housework. Well, I don't want to do the housework, so just don't. Look, honestly, life is too short. So yes, it's just, you know, as I say, seize the moment and just live it to the full, which is slightly difficult during a lockdown pandemic, but you know.
Without breaking the rules too much.
Look, over the next few weeks, as we're going to record one of these a week, I think, is the plan. We're going to discuss topics that I think are mostly common across us. Things like memory, maybe things like the aftershock, any depression, or things that have little tactics that we use that help us get around issues like memory. So we're gonna discuss those as we go through these different episodes of the podcast, and hopefully they might be useful to somebody out there, either who've been through, you know, some brain injury and brain surgery themselves, or their families, and help their families understand and maybe give them some help as to how they can support their family member over the weeks, months, and years of recovery. Okay, so I think we'll finish there. All right, and we'll be back next week.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Cheers, guys.